How is everybody doing? Strength Chat episode 115, and today I have got a very special guest for you. Today I'm joined by the president of Robertson Training Systems and the co-owner of IFAST. He's built his reputation of being a go-to resource for athletes and coaches, not only within professional sport, but within the fitness industry as well. Today I am joined by the one and only Mike Robertson. How are you doing?
Steve, man, I am doing great. How are you today?
I am very well, thank you very much. What's been happening in your world? What's been going on? What have you been up to?
Well, I think depending on when people listen to this, everything's different, right? We went from, training clients in a gym to training clients online via Zoom rooms in about a 2-week time period. So a lot going on, but, like all of us, just trying to kind of manage where we're at here, trying to keep, our clients and our members focused. And yeah, just trying to make the best out of this situation right now.
Nice. What has the response been like from the athletes that you've been working with, and having to do a lot more over Zoom and that sort of stuff? How have you found it?
Yeah, it's definitely different, and I think there's that like acclimatization period where people are trying to figure it out. Coaches are trying to get comfortable coaching in that environment where you can't walk up to somebody and put your hands on them or whatever. But again, you're making the best out of a bad situation, and kind of my mindset here is that as long as we're continuing to service the needs of our members and our clients, and we're doing what we need to. And, just right now, the needs are probably a lot different. It's not maybe the X's and O's of training that we're used to, but, there's a little bit of training and a lot of psychology and just empathy going on.
Yeah, nice. I've listened to your own podcast and followed your work quite a while. But for everyone listening who might not know your background and experience in coaching, just want to give a little bit of a background to yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll do my best to keep this brief because, over 20 years, I like to joke around that I've seen every nook and cranny of the fitness industry. I mean, I've done one-on-one, I've done semi-private, I've done large group training. I've been in rehab. Again, I've done pure personal training, and I've worked in high-level professional sports. So, over that 20 years, I spent 3 years doing rehab at a small fitness facility in Fort Wayne, Indiana, which is a small city in Indianapolis or in Indiana. I spent 3 years doing in-home personal training, which was a very unique situation where I got to, understand what it's like to go into people's homes, and everybody's got different equipment, and figure out, okay, how do I get them a training effect? How are the interpersonal dynamics different when you're in somebody's home versus them coming to you in a gym? And in 2008, Bill Hartman and I had been friends for 3 years. At that point in time, we decided it was time for us to do something together. So in 2008, we opened IFAST. So we are, as of now, going into our 12th year, pretty excited about, where the gym is at, the evolution that's occurred with it over the years. But yeah, that's a little bit about me in a nutshell.
Yeah, nice. And was the plan to always sort of get into coaching when you first sort of started out, or did you just sort of something that you naturally gravitated towards?
Yeah, no, that's such a great question. I don't know if people have really asked me in that kind of way, but when I was growing up, I was obsessed with basketball. Like, loved the sport of basketball. I played all the time. I grew up in the country. So like the nearest kid my age was like miles away. So I got really comfortable hanging out by myself, and I'd hit baseballs off a tee. I'd hit tennis balls against our barn door, but the basketball was always there for me. And so when I was, 13, 14 years old, I thought, I'm going to grow up and be a basketball coach. And over the course of my high school career, my primary coach and I really didn't see eye to eye. So I lost a little bit of that joy for the game. Got really into volleyball for a while, so I thought, maybe I'll do that. But about that time, as I started to wrap up high school and get into college, I realized, man, I really like this working out thing. Like, not just for the physiology benefits, right? And not just for the aesthetic benefits when you're 16 and you see some muscles come out for the first time. But I realized, man, this is really making me a better athlete overall. So when I got to college, I declared as an exercise science major. Didn't really know what I could do with that. But over those 4 years, I got really good at taking body comps, blood pressures while people rode on exercise bikes. I never really got to train or coach anybody. So I actually applied for the master's program at Ball State to basically kick the can down the curb because I had no clue what I was going to do. And I hadn't coached anybody. You know, I'd gone through 4 years of undergrad. I never coached. So it wasn't until that final semester I did an internship at the Ball State University athletic weight room. So now I'm in the gym, I'm working with athletes, and now I've got to merge like my two favorite things in life, right? Like I love working out, I love sports, and now I realize, man, I can put these two things together and get paid for it. So that's when I really realized, like, this is my jam. This is what I need to be doing.
Yeah, I always like asking that question because when I was going through school, I always either wanted to be a PE teacher or coach rugby, and then it got to a point where I was like, oh, actually, yeah, I quite like this training side of stuff. And then once I stopped playing rugby myself, just because the more I was working and the more I ended up doing other things and working in a gym, I sort of gravitated more towards powerlifting, which filled the whole. You sort of was, since I didn't play as much rugby anymore. So, yeah, I always find that question quite interesting because I think for everyone, it always starts out as, well, I enjoyed training. So I thought, I'll learn a little bit about it, which I think is quite good.
Absolutely.
So looking from the coaching point of view, obviously, you know, a vast amount of experience in different types of training. And one of the things, and actually you put it out recently on your social media, is obviously training quality versus training quantity. And I just kind of wanted to, I know there's a whole host of other topics that I sent you over, but just want to chat a little bit about what's the actual difference between training quality and quantity, and what does that actually mean, if you like?
Yeah. So I think part of this is just like an evolution as we get older. When we're young, 15, 16, whenever you start training, I think you just assume that you can like outwork things, right? And just the more volume, the better. It's like anything in life. So, man, rather than doing 3 sets of bench, I'm going to do 8. Or instead of doing 5 sets of arms, I'm going to do 25. You know, like that's how our pubescent minds think. And as you do this long enough, you kind of you come to this realization that, oh, wow, like sometimes when I do less, I actually get better results. Sometimes if I'm in the gym for an hour versus 2, I get better results. So that's something that I've really tried to stress, especially I think once I crossed 30. So I was really into powerlifting for about 5 years too in my 20s. And like that was my thing as far as training goes. I'd gotten done with college and I got really into the sport. And I loved it. And I feel like I probably could have done even better if I had been smarter about getting more quality training in. So like for me, I thought, man, I'll just go in the gym and crush it 5 by 5, you know, push it on all my assistance exercises. And, you know, sometimes by the end of that session, like the quality just isn't there anymore, you know, or you're just kind of getting through it. Versus as I got older and as I got into my 30s and I came back to the sport, I realized, man, I can get by on a lot less volume as long as it's really quality. And especially in a sport like powerlifting, where people would say there's not a high technical element, I would tend to disagree. You know, if you've ever tried to push your maximal amount of weight, you know, there's times you just don't have it strength-wise, but there's a lot of times where you miss lifts that you should make strength-wise because you didn't hit the groove.
Yeah.
Right? So, you know, as I got older, I started to realize, man, instead of trying to get, you know, all this volume, it's like, man, I'd rather get a little bit less volume, but make sure it's really clean, it's really crisp. I'm executing like I would in a meet.
Yeah.
And I remember Ed Cohn, this is probably 20, 25 years ago now. I used to listen to like these old MP3s of him. Again, that's how old I am. But like Ed would talk about, you know, look, you have to treat every weight on the bar like it's your max.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't matter if it's 135, 2 1/4, 315. If you treat all of those warm-up sets like they're a competition lift, when you go to a competition, it's not going to be any big deal because you've done it time and time and time again, and your technique is so ingrained. So that was something that always stuck out with me, and I think it just made more and more sense as I got older.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it because especially when it comes to stronger or getting stronger or getting faster, it is a skill, and you know it's that phrase.
Yeah.
You've got to master it a little bit more. When you're talking about quality, is that what you mean? Just making sure that you know form isn't breaking down, and does that quality look different with different populations that you're working with, or maybe even individuals that you're working with?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, I think of it in two ways. I think of training quality as kind of the rating of perceived exertion, right? Which most of us are familiar with, and making sure we're training where we need to there. But I always think of a rating of technique as well. So as I'm working up, I want to hit a certain RPE, but I want to make sure my rating of technique is on point as well. So if I'm hitting, say, a 9 out of 10 on an RPE, but my technical rating is like a 7 because I'm getting sloppy or loose or whatever, then I'm not getting what I want to out of it. Yeah. So it's trying to keep those two kind of hand in hand. Now, your second question is really good because we all know there's a massive difference between, say, a novice lifter and an elite level lifter and their idea of what good technique is. Yeah. And so when you are training an elite level athlete or an elite power lifter, like their technique is so tight, it's so pristine. And if they're going to make a mistake, it's going to be very minor. Like you may not even notice it as a coach, but they notice it and they feel it. Whereas with a developing athlete or somebody that's new to training, their technique could be all over the place, like literally rep to rep. And they have almost no consciousness of the fact that each rep looks vastly different. Yeah. So you have to treat it as such. And you have to kind of understand that, especially when somebody's just developing, man, it's going to take a lot of reps. You can't cheat that. They need a lot of reps. They need a lot of that. That's where they need volume, right? You want quality, but they need volume because they not only need good reps, but they need bad reps. Yeah. So that they can feel, oh, that was a bad rep. And they can figure out that's what I did wrong. And that's how I need to improve it in the future.
Yeah, I'm quite glad you mentioned that because sometimes one of the best questions I'll always ask the clients that I work with is how does that feel? Because, you know, the more that they do, I like the fact that if they turn around and say, yes, that was a bad rep, they've actually learned, I've taught them something and they've learned that, because sometimes I might not be there for their session, you know, they might be away or I might be away. So it's really good you mentioned that. It's made me realize I'm not going too far wrong when I'm speaking to clients there.
No, and the great thing about that too is the fact that you're asking them first. Yeah. You're getting their feedback versus you just telling them, oh, that was a good rep. And I think when you're a young coach or maybe when you're just starting, and maybe it's less of the case now, but I think early on, a lot of us like validated ourselves by how much we coached versus like, hey, if they're doing something wrong in a set of 5, let them do 2 reps wrong and try and figure it out. Because sometimes the first rep does just suck. Yeah. And sometimes the second one, they're trying to figure it out. But, you know, give them some leeway to learn. And I think that empowers them over time as a client or as an athlete.
Yeah, absolutely. Touching on the coaching side of things then, and obviously you mentioned that with at the elite level it might be real minor things that you're going to be picking up on, but maybe maybe general population clients or people that haven't trained for so long, it could be quite obvious. Is that something that as a coach, sort of looking at the program and the exercises, when it comes to elite athletes, is it the exercises that you need to focus on rather than the actual training program? And with the general population people, is it mainly you need to change the program quality rather than the exercise quality, if that kind of makes sense?
Yeah. So I think when it comes to elite athletes, everything that you do works within a narrower margin of error. Yeah. So, you know, if I've got a high level athlete and they're pushing their boundaries, they're pushing their limits, like I just have less wiggle room. So if something goes wrong, it's generally not going to be a good thing. Yeah. Versus, I mean, if you've got like a young kid and they're squatting the bar and they fail, it's probably not that big of a deal. Yeah. Right. But if somebody misses a lift with 700, 800, 900 pounds on their back, that's a lot bigger deal. Right. So with them, I just have to be really conscious of, you know, making sure that the technique stays on point as we drive load up. I'm definitely going to have to be more specific with regards to picking accessory lifts based on where they miss, specific asymmetries or issues that they may be dealing with. Again, when you're looking at a low-level client or athlete or somebody that's just in a developmental phase, like just give them the basics. Yeah. Give them the basics. Start to see where things, you know, break down. Not necessarily you drive them to that point, but like things will naturally break down, right? Because you watch somebody squat, bench, deadlift, hinge, row, push up, you see them do those exercises enough and you start to pick up very quickly, okay, these are some areas where we're going to have to spend more time, where we're going to have to build you up now so that we can continue to drive you up going forward. So I think that's the biggest difference is the more elite your client or athlete gets, the more specific you have to be versus when you're just starting out, you can be very general in nature, maybe tweak a few things based on how they move or, any specific issues that they may have. And you can get away with that for a pretty extended period of time before you have to get really specific and really dialed in with what you're giving them.
Yeah, it's like what you mentioned on the last point that if people do miss a rep or something like that, for people just starting out, like you mentioned, it isn't that big a deal. Whereas I think sometimes people can start too specific and then start being a little bit broader. Whereas actually, it should be flipping that on its head a little bit more, because especially at the elite level, something that may potentially go wrong in the gym, especially if they're playing like a field sport. That's obviously could lead to injury and then affect the team performance, or if they're running on the track or something like that. What else have you found or what have you seen where people usually go wrong when it comes to actually focusing on their training quality?
Yeah. One thing that I would mention, and I know this is always weird coming from somebody that powerlifted for a long period of time, but I think sometimes when it comes to our athletes, we almost put too big of an emphasis on strength, and you continue to push it to a point where you're getting past the point of diminishing returns. And I can say this with a ton of humility because I did it. I mean, I remember working with a female athlete that I coached for an extended period of time, coached her for, I think, 3 years of her high school career and then 4 years of her college career. And I just remember one off season we were squatting, and she's getting ready to go to camp, and I've got her basically like maxing out on like squats and deadlifts, like slow bar speeds, that sort of thing. And I just remember thinking to myself as she was grinding that rep out, like, what am I doing? Like, is this really making her a better soccer player at this point? Or, do I need to A, focus on something totally different? Do I need to B, just drop the weight and focus more on bar speed? Like, what else could I be doing at this point in time that's going to make her a better athlete? So, I mean, I think that's one of the big things when we talk about the gym and the weight room. We've learned over the years that, there is kind of a cutoff point, and it's different for every athlete, but there is definitely a cutoff point and a point of diminishing returns where it's like, could I continue to get stronger? Yes. But what am I going to have to sacrifice with regards to their overall athleticism to continue to get that? Because if we go to the far end of that spectrum and we look at a powerlifter, nobody's going to look at an elite level powerlifter and look and think that's an elite level athlete in the sense that they could go play basketball or volleyball or, whatever, tennis, right? Because you sacrifice motion, you sacrifice mobility in an effort to move maximal weights, and that's fine. Yeah. But I think we just also have to be conscious of that if we keep pushing the strength limits with athletes, that at some point it's going to start to rob or take away some of our natural athleticism.
Yeah. How do you manage that then? What are the sort of, like you mentioned there, obviously with the athlete that you're working with and watching a squat and thinking, actually, it's grinding that out a little bit. How do you manage that when you're working with athletes then? And, is there a case where actually you might get maybe 1 or 2 weeks into a program and realize, actually I need to change it, or you try and pick up those things before it actually happens?
Dude, that's such a good question. So I'll give you the way that we started out doing this. So once I started to figure out, okay, I'm pushing some of these athletes too far in that strength block, what I started to do was basically take it, and I just did it all with my eyes because we weren't using velocity-based training at the time, but it was all based on, are they still moving the bar with a certain amount of speed, and is their technique still a 9 out of 10? That was my criteria, because what I found was, if they could move the bar with a decent amount of speed, they're probably getting enough strength out of it, right? We don't need power lifter level strength. We need strong enough for a field quarter sport athlete. And I know I'm keeping them healthy. Now, here's what's kind of cool. A couple years, maybe like a year after that, we get a gym aware and we start using that. And what we found was when that technique starts to shift from what I would consider, we used to call it like a modified max effort phase. Like if we're using like the West Side terminology, it was like modified. Yeah. So what we found was when we're pushing our athletes and we're at that sweet spot of there's still a little bit of bar speed involved and the technique is still good. That was, generally about like 0.2 meters per second faster than like what their grinded out speed would be. So if we're using, say, a squat, for example, a terminal effort squat for an average person is like 0.3 meters per second. So for most of our athletes, we could put them around 0.5. Granted, there's individual variance there, but we could put them around 0.5 and it'd still look pretty good. So that was kind of the litmus test that we were using. And again, there's trial and error involved in this, but giving them that buffer zone, because again, I don't need true absolute strength for a soccer goalie, right? Or for a basketball player. But I want to touch on some strength qualities. Yeah. And I know that can give you a lot of positive benefits. So I think that's kind of how we shifted and evolved over the years. So if you've got a tool like a Gym Aware or a push band or something like that, great, use it. And if you don't, that's fine too. Use your eyes and kind of use that criteria of it's heavy, they're pushing a little bit of weight, but there's still some bar speed behind it, and their technique is still like a 9 out of 10. It's still really crispy and clean, then you're good. And I think you're going to see a lot of positive benefit from that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where sometimes an example is a guy came into the gym and he played rugby. He said, "Oh, I want to get stronger." I was like, "Okay, let's see what you do, see what you're doing." He's training.
Yeah.
He's already really, really strong. So it was sort of, how much stronger do you want to get?
Right.
Maybe let's work, like what you've mentioned, work on some other things. And I think that's the same for I'll train quite a lot of people who come in and they want to get stronger, build a little bit of muscle, but then it gets to a point where, wouldn't it be cool if we could actually use that strength, use that muscle, and then that opens quite a bigger batch of exercises that we can use. Maybe yes, they're not going to get to an elite level athlete, but it gives them something different to work on. Maybe some explosive exercises rather than there's only so many variations of squats you can do. There's only so many variations of maybe deadlifts that you can do or something like that. So yeah, I find that interesting. Just sort of moving on to the next couple of questions that I had, and sometimes there's some content out there, or some coach will be quality means doing the least amount of exercises that give you the biggest bang for your buck, if you like. What are your thoughts on can you do too little, or is there a bare minimum that you can still do but still get your results?
Yeah, I think the problem is when we use the word like results, right? We assume it's like black and white. Either you got results or you didn't, versus some sort of gradient. So you can absolutely do too little, right? Like if you're training like once a week, you're probably not going to see the results you want. You get up to like 2 times a week with an appropriate amount of volume, you can probably maintain. You're probably not going to see a massive improvement in fitness unless you're totally deconditioned, you've never worked out before. So that's why most people fall into that 3 to 4 times a week, kind of split, and they figure out what works for them from there. But yeah, I'm a big believer in less versus more. Yeah. If you look at my programs, a lot of times people that come from other systems or other programs where they're used to seeing 12, 15, maybe 20 or more exercises in a session are kind of shocked when they come in. And I mean, we cover a lot of bases in our workouts, and sometimes they don't count like our speed and agility work. But if you come into our gym and you only see 5 or 6 like strength exercises, people are kind of like put off at first. They're like, I'm used to doing like 30 things and I'm in here like 2 hours. I'm like, well, I'd rather do like 75 minutes and make sure it's really, really clean, really crisp. You're getting the training effect that I want to out of it, because it's not just putting in the work. It's about being able to recover from the work. Yeah. And that's where I find a lot of people struggle. Like they smash themselves in the gym, but then they do nothing on the back end to take care of and support themselves. And that's a whole nother topic. Right. But I think for me, I always err on the side of less is more. And part of that again is my population too, because I work with a lot of basketball players in specifically now. And I'm not the only thing that they do on a daily basis. Like a 75-minute session with me is going to be stacked on top of a 75 or 90-minute skill session as well. So, I'm definitely biased. And if I had somebody that was in phenomenal shape, like in their 20s or early 30s, They had low levels of stress. They ate great. They slept great. Man, I'd be willing to push the envelope a heck of a lot more than that. But I'm also just, I guess, realistic in the fact that a lot of clients and a lot of athletes probably don't recover as well as we would like to think they do.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like what you mentioned there about some people coming in and doing 20 exercises, and probably you might be able to touch on this a little bit more, but at some point there's going to be either maybe diminishing returns from that, or form by the end of that workout isn't going to be great. Because when you first go in and you think, oh yeah, first couple of exercises, maybe big compound lifts or something like that, and by the time sort of maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours into a session, I would think surely boredom would at some point. And as well, form, or you might not be able to lift as much, so you're getting that much of an effect from it. What are your thoughts on that?
No, you're spot on, man. And what I end up seeing, because I've got this unique mix of professional athletes, but then I've still got a core group of like collegiate level athletes now that come back. Yeah. And so, it's not uncommon for me to see programs where athletes have 20, 25, maybe as many as 30 different exercises in a single workout. Yeah. I mean, it's insane. Now, granted, if you're doing 30 sets or 30 exercises, you may only be doing 1 or 2 sets of each. Yeah. But still, I mean, these workouts are 2 hours long. And so I feel like when you see a workout like that, and I hate to say this because I love our industry and I don't like bad-mouthing people, but I feel like they literally just don't know what to do. Yeah. They don't know what to do. They don't know what they should be focusing on. So they just use the shotgun approach and they're throwing everything at it, right? It's like, I mean, some of these workouts would be like squat, RDL, lunge, calf raise. Like that in itself, if you do that at a high level, that would be a hard workout. But that's like just the start. Then it's, bench press, row, shoulder press. Then it's like an ab circuit. Then it's like 3-way shoulder raise, neck, ab circuit. It's like, dude, you're again, these are athletes. Like athletes want to play their sport. Like some of them like the gym more than others, but they don't want to be in the gym for 2 hours just lifting weights. And so I think that's one of the issues that we see in our industry is like, there's just no real thought process of, okay, if I had to whittle this down and get maximum bang for my buck, what are just for fun, let's say the 6 to 8 exercises that I would use in this session. And if you need more than like eight exercises in a session, I would challenge you to find better exercises.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. One of the things is, as you were speaking there, so we have like trainer meetings in the gym that I'm in, and we sort of every coach was sort of putting a delivery together because we've all got different expertise, but want to pool that knowledge base together. Yep. And one of the other coaches, which is quite a good system that I think sometimes you get a little bit of a light bulb, and someone's just put that in a different or a better way than what I could put it in. Yep. And there was the different movements or the different areas that they're going to work on, and then they'd just be graded on those exercises. Yeah. So like, okay, right, for power. So does this person need power? Can they progress that a little bit more? And it's just sort of, I'm trying to think of it like a DJ where you're pushing things up and dropping things down a little bit.
Oh, I like that.
I think that's a better way of looking at it, so that you've got your own template to use, if you like, but you know what these exercises are going to work. So I think sometimes, like what you mentioned there, if it's a squat or a reverse lunge or anything like that, that's going to be massively taxing. But if you just have, okay, so I want to do a single leg exercise, right? You don't have to throw every single leg exercise in there. I mean, there's some people that have got really good shoulder mobility and can maybe do a barbell split squat. Other people don't. Okay, let's do a safety bar split squat, or even okay, let's just stick with dumbbells. You can still get a really good workout from that, rather than having loads and walking out, not being able to walk down the stairs or anything like that. On the flip side of that, because obviously you mentioned there with the basketball players that you'll work with, and they can play quite a lot of games within a short space of time. On the other side of that, sort of doing too much training and how the quality of training can impact there. So for a lot of people that maybe get involved in CrossFit, which is loads and loads of work, and quite long workouts, or people who, like what you mentioned, who maybe are at college or are used to doing quite a lot of training. Can you do too much, or could you still do a lot as long as it's quality, if that makes sense?
Yeah, and again, I don't worry as much about training until we've had the discussion of recovery first.
Yeah.
So I need to know, what does your nutrition look like? What does your calorie level look like? Macronutrient splits. I want to dive into that a little bit. And I'm not a dietitian by any stretch, but I can take a quick look and tell you if somebody's kind of on track or not. I want to talk about sleep, stress management, all of those things, because that's the first. It's like they're opposite sides of the equation, but they have to balance out.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden, I don't just worry about if somebody wants to train a lot, I'm all for that.
Yeah.
But you just have to have the tools to recover from that. And so what I'll tend to do is, if it is somebody that likes to train a lot, we got to make sure we check all those basic boxes first. But then I'm going to dive into more of the aggressive recovery modalities as well, right? So that's where, if you're doing all these other things, okay, now we need to talk about massage, or we need to talk about float tanks, whatever tools. It's massively perception influenced. Some people love massage, some don't. Some people love the float tanks, some don't. But that's where, if you're really going to, I think of it as dials, right? So if you're really going to crank up the training dial, you really got to crank up that recovery dial as well, because if they're not lined up, you might get away with it for a little while, but you're not going to get away with it forever.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with the mentality that sometimes more is always better. I'll increase the amount of workouts that I'm doing, and then 2 weeks down the line, they've either got an injury or are just so tired that the actual the workouts that they're doing, they're just maybe either the weight's not increasing, or they're slowing down, or whatever it may be. With because obviously you touched on a couple of strategies there. With that, with people who are wanting to train more, would you implement actually a recovery program, or would you say, right, these are the things that we need to tick off? Because I think a lot of people think that, yes, the training side of things, but like what you said, the recovery things need to be on top, need to be balanced as well. So what approaches would you take with that?
So I think, first and foremost, how do I address both sides of that equation, right? So I'd want to look at the training program and make sure that everything that we have in there is valuable.
Yeah.
So the first things first, if you've got any kind of just junk, I used to call it junk volume, right? If you're just doing junk work that's not giving you a return on your investment, that needs to go.
Yeah.
Right. So you can start to balance it out there. But then, when you start to think about recovery, again, talking nutrition, talking about sleep, trying to be objective about these things too, because I think that's where a lot of people can just, I feel okay, and they're just slowly burning themselves out. So I like to be objective about these things, whether it's a tool like Morpheus, Joel Jamison's band that he uses to track HRV and resting heart rate. It could be a tool like that. It could be a tool like an Oura Ring, which is something that I use to track my sleep. I want to be as objective as possible about this stuff. But you can absolutely throw in something that I think is very valuable is active recovery. Too often we think of training as just high intensity work, but it doesn't have to be like that. One of the most valuable things that we do, or that we try and do with our clients and athletes, is espouse how important low intensity work is.
Yeah.
So it's not as sexy, but hey, you're quarantined for a month, work on your cardio. Go for an hour walk every day. Spend 15 minutes every day working on your mobility, just moving your body and your joints around so that you don't break down, so your body does feel good. So I think there's so many ways that you can address that. If somebody wants to crank up the training and that sort of thing, but you have to be prudent. You have to be judicious in how you do it. And you also have to be very just kind of regimented in how you do it. You can't say, I train 4 times a week, I'm going to start training 8 times a week. You know what I mean? Because that's how most people think. Or I haven't run in 10 years, I'm going to go run 5 miles today. and they wonder why they have shin splints for 2 weeks. So, if you're going to start increasing your training volume or frequency, however you want to think about it, you just got to slow roll it. And you got to give your body time to accommodate and adapt and figure out, okay, what is my sweet spot? Because everybody's different, and as we age, our own bodies are different. My body's different now at 40 than it was at 30, and it's different at 40 than it definitely was at 20. We could drink Jägermeister till 3 a.m. on a Saturday and go squat on Sunday, and probably wouldn't be our best session, but we could do it. And I don't espouse that. I don't give that as advice, but just what you can tolerate changes over the years. So you kind of constantly have to figure out, what is my own personal sweet spot based on where I'm at in life.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And actually, when you were mentioning there, so I was in the build up for my own training, in a build up going into a competition. Ideally was going to be competing at the start of May, and obviously I had a lot of clients that were going to compete then as well. Obviously, that's been stopped. So going from quite high intensity, not as much volume, to now doing a little bit more movement and a little bit more higher rep stuff, because where I live, I don't have a squat rack. I picked a 30 kilo log up from the gym and some kettlebells, making the best of it. But actually, going for, because usually, there'll be sessions in the gym, or there'll be programming, there'll be quite a lot of other things. Whereas now, which I think a lot of people obviously always say that they don't, I have a little bit more time because I'm not going from session into session. I can spend a little bit more time. Right, I'm going to go for a walk, an hour's walk, something like that, and the impact that has is really good. I know a lot of people have been, because they're working from home with the current situation now, they're saying, oh, well, I can work out every single day. But because obviously the normal routine's been changed a little bit, the sleep isn't very good. So they're either staying up later or, sleeping in a little bit more. So actually, after 4 days on the trot of doing whatever workouts they've been doing, they're feeling a little bit beat up. Right, well, actually, go for a walk today. And how about you either get some more quality, just get some more quality sleeping, go to bed a little bit earlier, try not to drink as much coffee, because if there's a pot sitting there, I know I'm really bad for this. Yeah, I'm going to have a little bit more. That all comes up. Because one of the posts that I saw you put out, which actually I thought was really, really interesting. How does this relate to and you called it sort of the training bank, if you like. Do you just want to expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, so I think I originally stole this analogy from Joel Jameson because it's just brilliant. And while people may not think of training in this way, everybody, like it or not, kind of understands a bank account.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you got to keep putting money in the account because you're going to take money out. And eventually, if you don't put money in, you're in the red and you got no more money to spend. Right? So I like to think of how we treat our bodies very much like a bank account, right? So we have to be making deposits all the time. And your deposits are, eating whole nutritious foods, taking the right supplements, getting enough sleep, controlling and managing stress, doing the right kind of workouts. And when I say the right kind, I mean workouts that facilitate your fitness and your recovery, and not just the ones that smash you. Right. And you need some smashers, right? Like if you're trying to push big weights, you need some of those where you're really pushing your limits. But just understand that those are going to take more of a toll on your body. Yeah. So you've got all these ways of depositing money into your training bank account. Well, you've got ways of taking it out too. Okay. So if you're not eating nutritious foods, well, that could ramp up inflammation. That's going to impact your ability to recover. If you're not sleeping enough, again, impacting your ability to recover, it's going to negatively impact your hormonal status, all the things that should be helping you get stronger are now kind of working against you. If you can't manage your stress, right? That's another thing that's going to take away from your ability to recover. And then again, those really high intensity workouts are going to take money out of that account as well, right? Because they're more stressful than your body can tolerate. So I think the whole mindset is, are you constantly putting enough money into your bank account so that you can train at the level you want to?
Yeah.
And everybody is different. So if I've got a 40-year-old client that just wants to come in the gym twice a week and go for a couple walks and stay relatively fit, they don't have to be super spot on with how they do things. But if I'm working with a high level power lifter or an elite level NBA basketball player, man, their training bank account had better be fueled up all the time and topped off, because if it's not, that's when something bad happens, right? And it could be something minor like an ankle sprain, or it could be something massive like an ACL tear.
Yeah.
So this is where you've got to keep your training bank account in the black. And I think people love that analogy because it just makes sense. And it's not like, oh, let's talk about homeostasis and allostasis and all these like crazy scientific terms that nobody understands. It's like, this is an analogy that resonates with virtually every client, every athlete that you work with.
Yeah, it's a good point that you mentioned there, about the science side of things, because I know for me, I quite like looking at the science side of things and, figuring all that out. However, sometimes when you're working with clients, they just need to know, right, how am I getting on with training? What's going to make me get from A to B? And the explanation that you put there, I think that is a really good. So if you took that from Joel Jameson, I'll take that from you, and then start using that. But I think that's a really good way of looking at it, because sometimes it's like burning the candle at both ends. People will really, really want to push it, and then it will get to that point where they get injured, and then actually, instead of when they're doing something by either doing more or not focusing on nutrition, not focusing on their sleep, they've actually got to a point where they're actually hindering themselves rather than actually helping themselves. And if you're injured, that's going to set you a couple of weeks, months back to, which is going to massively knock someone's confidence. And if they don't do that properly or have the patience to do it, they might end up always having a sort of uphill challenge, if you like.
Can I just tack one point onto that, because it's such a great point. And this is where I come back to that idea of training quality and being smart about your training and being consistent, because too often we get caught up in this idea of, oh man, I'm going to be so strong in the next 8 weeks. Right. And so we get so caught up in this training and we end up getting injured. And then we got to take 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, however long it is. It negatively impacts our training. And now we're weaker than where we started. Yeah. And we're starting all over, and we got to start this whole cycle again. And it's ramp up, get injured, ramp back up, get injured. So rather than going through that cycle all the time, why not just stay healthy, undershoot just a little bit, but have like this more steady ascent? And so that's kind of the way that I do things, because look, at this point in my career, I'm not training elite level powerlifters, people that are trying to squat 1,200 pounds. So the people that I want to, or that I'm working with and that I want to work with, are people that enjoy lifting. They want to get strong over a lifetime. And so they're kind of okay with, hey man, we're not going to see just how strong we can get you in 6 weeks, but let's see how strong we can get you over the next 6 months or the next 6 years. That's a lot more exciting to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point. Some people have said that there was a couple of cycles for people that are wanting to get involved in powerlifting, because I think it's a natural progression. Once you start seeing the numbers go up in the gym, it's a natural progression to think, oh, actually, maybe I'll get involved in powerlifting. And some of the first questions is, after a block of training, I'm going to test my maxes after this. No, I'm not. I only want you to push that weight when it comes to a competition, because if something goes wrong, in the gym, we've got nothing to show for it. We've got no medal to say we've competed or anything like that. No PBs. We've just done it in the gym, and we don't even know, whether we don't want to risk having an injury or anything like that. But there are other ways. So I know for one woman that I'm training, we just said, right, okay, let's do an AMRAP of some weights that you've been doing. And she ended up actually doing more reps at a weight that she did on a final squat attempt in her last competition. She actually ended up
awesome.
4. So she was like, oh yeah, it felt okay. I was like, well, aren't you a little bit more happy? And she was like, oh well, it's not a PB. And I'm like, you just did your final squat for lots of reps. So I can be, pretty confident that come the next competition, she's 100% going to be able to squat more than that, because she's just done it for 4 reps.
Absolutely. And I have this discussion all the time with my powerlifting focused clients. It's like, look, you got to trust the process and understand that there's a difference between training and competing.
Yeah.
If you go in the gym every day with a competing focus, now look, certain people can get away with it for a long time. And if you look at like what made Westside so successful, and I've talked to and known, like been good friends with a lot of guys that have trained at Westside, that competitiveness made them great. But it's also why so many of them broke down. And so that's like kind of the trade-off you're going to have. So like what I tell my clients is, look, you're not here to try and break world records. That's fine. Let's be really smart. Let's train until it's time to compete. When it's time to compete, then trust me, your strength will be where it needs to be. But you've got to trust that process and not feel the need or the compulsion to test your max like every week or every month, because it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing just touching on as well when we're talking about sort of recovery and maybe pushing it too much. There's also that other side of people who are doing too much and training quite a lot. But there might only be that one small thing, like they're maybe not eating enough, and they're just staying the same. They're not getting stronger. They're not dropping anything. They're just maintaining, rather than it might be, okay, we need to eat a little bit more food, or focus on some other things, which I find quite interesting. That's the the other end of the spectrum, if you like.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, yeah, plateaus are interesting because sometimes they're a sign of you need to tighten a screw somewhere.
Yeah.
You need to dive in. And so that I always use a plateau as a time to, okay, like, let's really like reevaluate everything. Yeah. And what's interesting is sometimes you don't have to change anything. Sometimes it's a natural course, right? Like sometimes a plateau is just your body kind of stabilizing before it goes up again. And I think if you train long enough, we've all seen that. Now, on the flip side, there are times when you get in and you find out, okay, no, there's definitely some things we can work on here. And the client that was getting 8 hours of sleep a night is now getting 6. Or that used to be 90% on point with their diet is now 75. Or, they've got this major life stressor that's holding them back now. So I think anytime you have a plateau, it's a great point in time to have some discussions and dig a little bit deeper and see if there is something that you need to change or you need to tweak to get to that next level of performance.
It's as though you've sort of read the next couple of notes that I had on the it goes quite nicely into the next one, because I'm really glad that you said there, because you put it in a lot better way than what I've maybe tried to explain it to the clients that I'm working with, that your body is trying to stabilize and you just need to have a look and see what's going from there. Is that a time where potentially you would maybe look at having a deload in training, or would you just or would the deload just be maintaining that period of training or whatever you're doing in the background in terms of nutrition for that period of time before you think about, right, okay, let's start maybe ramping things up or changing things around?
Yeah. So I think I'd have to look at the overall training program first to give you like a definitive answer. A deload is definitely a tool in the toolbox, and one that I think is vastly underrated. But without seeing an overall program, like if they've been plateaued for a week or two, I'm probably not that worried about it. If it's been something where it's been 4 to 6 weeks and we've been continuing to kind of like pound things, and we're not getting what we want, that would be a good time to, number one, have some of those discussions, maybe take a 5 to 7 day deload, back off things a little bit, and then see if you don't get a rebound. Because that's what happens a lot of times, right? It's not really that they're plateaued per se. It's just they've had a massive amount of fatigue that's built up and accrued over time, and it's masking their ability to display their current level of fitness. So lots of tools in the toolbox there, but I think, maybe you have to tweak something, and maybe it is just as simple as, hey man, if they've been kind of pounding things for a little bit and their body is just kind of run down and fatigued, you give them a deload week, and then all of a sudden you kind of see the momentum start going back in your favor again.
Would you base that over maybe a couple of sessions? Because I've had it before where people have come in and they've maybe had a rubbish day at work, or they've had an argument, or for whatever reason it's just quite a stressful time. How far would you let that go, rather than basing it on one session?
Yeah, it would really depend on what I'm seeing with their lifts overall. But I think maybe even more importantly, it would be based on their demeanor when they walk in and the interactions that we're having. If I can just tell somebody is lethargic, sluggish, off of their game, then I probably wouldn't let it go more than a week. I mean, frankly, look, if somebody comes in and they're sluggish, that day we're having a discussion.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm trying to root out, is this a one-time thing? Is this a warning sign of bigger things? You know, if it's just, oh yeah, I had too much to drink last night. Okay, well, that's easy. Stop doing that. If it's like, oh man, I had a massive fight with my boyfriend, girlfriend, fiance, spouse, whatever. Okay, now that could be something bigger and something that's going to impact us for a longer period of time. So I'm going to be triaging that first day, but generally I'll give things, 5 to 7 days. I'm going to try not to overreact in the short term, but I also don't want to underreact in the long term. If this is something I feel like is going to be an issue, then I'm going to start implementing strategies to kind of mitigate any negative effects as quickly as I can.
Yeah, it's really good that mentioning there that actually you're looking at the other circumstances around it, not just the training side of things, because yes, exercise causes stress on the body, but there's a whole host of other factors out there that actually can have detrimental effects on the training side of things, which are sometimes not as controllable, or you need to take those into account.
For sure.
Quite a lot of topics that we chatted about there. I feel like I could have probably gone on and gone into loads of other topics on there, but yeah, thanks a lot for taking the time to chat with me. I really enjoyed that.
No, this was great.
For everyone listening, for everything that we've chatted about there, what would be your take-home points or words of wisdom for everyone listening?
Yeah, I think if you're a coach or trainer that's listening to this, just understand that there is no fast track to success in this game. It takes time. It takes reps, just like we talked about, beginning clients and athletes need a lot of reps. As coaches, we need a lot of reps. And there's just a big difference when you move from being an athlete or being a trainee to becoming a coach, and things that you maybe take for granted and things that you intuitively understand, taking that and being able to communicate it effectively to somebody else really is an art, and it takes time. So don't get frustrated with yourself. Be okay with making mistakes. Obviously, we don't want people to get hurt, but be smart, be okay with the fact that you're going to fail, but just continuously try and learn, try and evolve, because let's be honest, we need more great trainers and coaches probably than ever before. So
awesome. A nice way to round off the podcast. And for anyone who might have any questions on anything that we've chatted about, or look at the content that you put out there and through the work that you do, where can people find you or reach out to you?
Yeah, the best place to go is just Robertson Training Systems with an S.com. Just literally thousands of pieces of content there, articles, videos, podcasts. All my social media is there, so you can reach out either through the website or through social. Definitely most active on Instagram right now. It's where a lot of my athletes are. It's the medium that I enjoy the most because of the interaction and talking to people. So yeah, if you've got any questions, concerns, you want to learn more about what I do, robertsontrainingsystems.com is probably the best place to do it.
Awesome. Yeah, for everyone listening, 100% check out the work that Mike does. I know I've listened to his podcast and read the articles and the content that he's put out there, and it's helped me as a coach and as a lifter myself as well. So thanks a lot, Mike, for taking the time to chat with me. I really appreciate you taking the time doing this. Thanks a lot to everyone listening, and I will see you all next week.